That was a very, very interesting game. And the first thing that I have to say about the Giants is they deserve credit for really playing very tough against good competition. The Tampa Bay Bucs, in my opinion, are one of the best teams in the league, and the Giants definitely went toe-to-toe for them. With that being said, they're still 1-7. So at some point you have to get those tough victories, but a lot to unpack in this one. And then, we'll get into week 8 as a whole. But, for the Giants against the Bucs, it was looking good early. Giants defense was really smothering Brady. He did not look sharp. He would eventually get there, as he usually does. But, they jumped out to a 14-3 lead. Ronald Jones fumbles the ball. Giants take advantage. And Deion Lewis gets a receiving touchdown on a third down. And Wayne Gallman would get a rushing touchdown. And they would be up 14-3. And, as a Giant fan, you're definitely, the whole way through I was expecting them to lose. And like I said last week, that was my preference. Would I have been upset if they won? Not really. But my preference was that they lose this game. But here nor there, the Bucs would get a field goal at the end of the half to make it 14-6. And then Daniel Jones throws an interception at the start of the second half, and that definitely kind of got the ball rolling for Tampa. They would get connect on a field goal to make it 14-9, and would eventually get a touchdown, Rob Gronkowski, to make it 15-14. They would not get the 2-point conversion. The Giants would then go down and fight right back. They'd get a field goal to make it 17-15. And, fast forward into the fourth quarter, they're up, they're in Buck territory, and Daniel Jones throws a really critical interception where he had some pressure on him. And earlier in the game, he took a critical sack to put them out of field goal range. So there was a few instances where the Giants definitely left some points on the board. But here was a situation where he's probably thinking, I can't take the sack again, because that would have been a big field goal to put them up 20-15. It was, I believe it was a second down play. And he rolls out and he gets picked off. And that was critical. That was huge. And then Tampa Bay responds with a touchdown. And that puts them up at the time by a score of 22-17. They would not, they would, kick the extra point. I was wondering if maybe they'd go for 2 there. As it turns out, I guess that was the right decision. So they're 22-17. So to this point, Jones definitely was not great. Really had some guys open, and there was a few times with Slayton or Shepard, and he just couldn't connect. You combine that with the turnovers, and every reason to be on him. Obviously he always makes those good throws throughout a game. So he almost always shows that flash, that that kind of it factor, that like this kid could be the QB of the future. But tonight was not a great night, certainly to that point. So the Bucs had a tough decision. The Giants had used all their timeouts, and the Bucs on a 3rd and 1 did not get the first. So it's a 4th and 1 with about 3.5 minutes or so to go. And they decided to settle for the field goal, which actually won me my fantasy matchup, against Casey, the brains behind this operation. So, shout out there. I know he wasn't too thrilled about that, but, was lucky that Ryan Suckup put up 15 points, kind of out of nowhere. But anyway, back to the game. They settled for that field goal to make it 25-17. So the Giants need a touchdown and a 2-point conversion. And this was a very, very up and down drive. So there's an early 4th down, and the Giants have had a propensity for when they're down and they need to score late, they don't even really ever get close. Like, this goes back to the this goes back to like later Eli years and recent with Daniel Jones, where like they don't even really get competitive. But on a 4th and 5, Jones rolls out and he finds Slayton and it kind of threw the Bucs off a little bit, just the way the play went. So he caught it, and it wouldn't have been a first down if he had been tackled, but, he kind of lost the guy, then someone missed the tackle, and he gets the first down. So he keeps the drive alive. But then, they may have got another first down, and then all of a sudden it's 4th and 16. And the Giants would convert. Jones again rolls out, had some time, and finds Sterling Shepard for the first down. So at this point you're thinking, all right, well, they might score here, and it may come down to the 2-point conversion and whether they get that. And sure enough, it would. Jones makes a very nice pass to Golden Tate. And a great catch by Tate. Tate doesn't do much during the course of the game, but he still has the ability to make really nice catches, and a lot of the times on touchdowns as well. So good toe tap, and now it's a 2-point game, and it comes down to the 2-point conversion. At this point, there's about 28 seconds left, and the Bucs, they had 3 timeouts, but then they used one before the 2-point conversion, so they would have had 2. So keep in mind, if the Giants tied it, the Bucs definitely still could have been in a position to win the game of regulation. So that needs to be said. However, chances are if they tied it up, a normal team probably gets this to overtime. So the play goes to Dion Lewis. Goes out of the flat to the right corner. Not necessarily to the right corner, but goes out to the right, and Jones throws it, and Antoine Winfield gets there right around the same time as the ball and Lewis. So initially, you don't see a flag, and then all of a sudden they called it. They called the flag for pass interference on Winfield. And usually, when you see that and you call the flag, rarely, if ever, do they pick it up. And I'm glad that I wasn't fully invested like I was last week in that Giant Eagle game, because I would have been livid. Now, when they showed the replay, it was close. It was close. You could definitely go either way. If they hadn't called that a pass interference initially, I don't think people would really be up in arms. I think, Giants fans would be annoyed for sure, because you could have made the case. It's the fact that they called the flag and they picked it up. So they picked it up. The Giants would, try for an onside kick. They wouldn't get it. The Bucs end up winning by 2. So a very controversial ending. And I'm wondering, if there had been fans in the stands, would they have had the balls to pick that up? Because I think the crowd would have been going absolutely bonkers out of control if, they had been in attendance. So that one will be talked about for sure. That just because you never ever see it. And I have to say tonight, and again, this is coming from someone who, would have preferred the outcome that the Giants lose, that the officiating was not really in the Giants' favor at all. There was definitely some questionable calls along the way that definitely cost them. There were. And that was the cherry on top. So it's the same thing with the Giants, really. They are except that San Francisco game, they are extremely competitive. And I like Joe Judge a lot. I think this is a very good head coach. This team is definitely buying into his system. There's no question about it. Do they lack talent? Yes, for sure. But there are pieces in place. You can see where this could develop. And just the unfortunate thing is that the NFC East could easily be theirs. I don't think it's a stretch to say that this is the best team in the division. Do I think that they will win the division? Absolutely not. No way. I think this is going to be the Eagles' division in all likelihood. But they really have been impressive. I thought that the Bucs were going to win a lot easier than they did. And the defense has been good, but they can't really get the big stops. That's the problem with them. Not enough pressure on the quarterback when they need it. And so, it's kind of the same thing with them. And the offensive line held up for the most part against a really strong, Bucs front. They held their own for the most part. Shane Lemieux was in tonight. Will Hernandez was out with COVID. And I thought Lemieux did a good job, so pretty much same old with the Giants, though. They lose. It comes down to the wire, and it just doesn't work out. So as far as the NFC East now, you have the Eagles at 3-4-1. You have the Redskins, or not the Redskins, the Washington football team at 2-5. The Cowboys at 2-6, and the Giants at 1-7. So, now not looking great for the Giants. Their next two games are against Washington and Philly. So if they were to have any chance, and again, I'm not counting on it, but if they were to, let's say, beat Washington and Philly, you're definitely talking about a different situation for sure, which is crazy, right? Like, they'd be 3-7 and very much in play with 6 games to go, but we'll get there when we get there. Very ugly game last night between Philly and Dallas with Ben DiNucci as the quarterback. Not a surprise. As bad as Andy Dalton has been playing, he certainly is a lot better than a 6th round rookie from James Madison. So Dallas played tough, and Carson Wentz has his shaky moments. He definitely does. He kind of does what he needs to, but he has not been impressive. I think he has 12 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. He's way more aggressive than he needs to be at times. And, but nonetheless, Philly gets a couple of key divisional wins. Now they have the bye, and they play the Giants. They beat the Giants, then really their only obstacle would be Washington potentially. And that will hinge greatly on the results of the Washington Giants game this coming week. But let's, there's been too much NFC East talk. Let's not do that to ourselves. A lot of good games in the NFL yesterday, and Steelers-Ravens lived up to the hype. It did. And the Steelers, they seem like the class of the division. We'll see what happens on Thanksgiving. That's going to be a great game in Pittsburgh. If the Ravens win that game, things are going to look different, but the Steelers are undefeated. And if you look at their remaining schedule, by no means is this a 16-0 team, not at all. However, they're going to have a pretty damn good record when it's all said and done, based on if they stay healthy, because their schedule is not difficult at all. So, if I had to guess, they're probably going to get that 1 seed in the AFC, and get that bye. Other teams will have something to say about that, right? The Chiefs, you can't count Mahomes and those guys out of it as far as the 1 seed. But right now, it's looking like Pittsburgh's. And it's amazing what quarterback play can do, where Roethlisberger is back after being injured, and they're right back to where they were. But the strength of this team is that defense. This is, like I felt like with the Bucs, although my opinions of the Bucs defense have taken a little bit of a step back tonight. That Steeler defense is amazing. Really good. And Lamar Jackson, again, when they're losing games, do you trust him? I'd be curious from Ravens fans. Do you trust that he can, lead you back in when you need that big score? Now, I know it was a bit of a back and forth, and he did throw a touchdown to Marquise Brown when they were down by 4 points. So he does have it in him at times, but I just feel like if he's going to be one of the top quarterbacks, he needs to do better in these situations where they're down late and they're trailing and they need, some scores. So, that was a fun game, and it's a shame that wasn't a national game. It's a shame that, being here, you're for, obviously, people have Red Zone, I have Red Zone, so I was, you're able to see it, but the Jets and the Chiefs are on CBS. You're stuck with that. And the Chiefs just absolutely, manhandled the Jets. I'm not sure when that win comes. It could come. It's sometimes you kind of just luck your way into victories. I think, they're home against the Pats on Monday night. But yeah, it's tough for me to sit here and say, yeah, the Jets are going to, pull out that upset. But, the Patriots had a very tough loss at the Bills. Division very much still in play. And Cam with just a critical fumble. And I thought it was a pretty good game they played. To that point, they don't have a whole lot. Edelman was hurt. They have no weapons at all. Stephon Gilmore was out. And I think that also speaks to the fact that the Bills, we're seeing a team that's not quite as good as that record initially indicated. But the Bills are able to get a big win there. And then that leads to Miami, who, not thanks to Tua. Tua did not look great, but he didn't need to do much because that defense and special teams was great for the Dolphins. So it looks like it's going to come down to Buffalo and Miami. And Miami looks really, they got something going there. Like I said, I like Brian Flores a lot. They're all buying in. And again, it's another Belichick disciple. Maybe some of the, with Judge and with Flores, maybe some of these, understudies of Belichick are starting to, come through as head coaches, certainly with Flores. So maybe it'll be a new situation in the AFC East with the Dolphins and the Bills fighting for the division, where it's always the Patriots. I still don't fully count the Patriots out. Keep in mind, they do have 2 games left with the Jets this season, so that has to be factored in. And moving on to the NFC West, kind of touched on that Dolphin-Ram game a bit. The Rams are definitely not a 5-3 team. I've not been impressed by them, and they beat up in the NFC East. They beat the Cowboys. They beat Washington. They beat Philly. And they beat the Giants. And then they beat the Bears, who, while they we'll get into that game, it was a good effort. But that's still, that's a game that the Rams should win, and they did win. So, yeah, I think when the dust settles in the NFC West, I don't think we're going to see the Rams on top of the division, although there's been a bit of a big shakeout with the Niners-Seahawks, where Garoppolo gets hurt. And I think it can be a question as to whether Garoppolo to Mullins is a downgrade. It may not be. But either way, it's not an ideal situation. But even bigger, George Kittle is going to be out for an extended amount of time. He may not be back this year. We'll see. So that one took me by surprise. I thought San Francisco was going to give Seattle a much more competitive game, and it didn't happen. Seattle, the score would make you believe that it was somewhat close. It wasn't. Seattle had that game in hand pretty much the whole way. So, it might end up coming down to Seattle and Arizona, especially because Arizona got that win last week against Seattle. So, as much as I'm also not a huge Seattle believer, Russell Wilson's just so good. And that offense is just like pretty much, with Lockett and Metcalf and what should be a decent enough running game once they get healthy, that they should take that NFC West, if I had to guess. Saints Bears. This had a lot going on. Where Javon Wims gets tossed for just out of nowhere, just, throwing punches for no reason. Or at least it didn't appear that way. I think he claimed that the guy spit on him, and I know that he was getting into it with Anthony Miller, the cornerback for the Saints. So yeah, he punches the guy twice, and they said like that wasn't in the guy's character, but you just can't do that. So he was suspended for a couple of games. I think he's going to appeal it, but this game had a lot of everything, and I thought it was a good effort by the Bears. Again, my expectations for them aren't very high, but I've seen a lot of them. I saw them play the Giants. They've been on some national games. They beat the Bucs on Thursday Night Football, and then we saw them lose to the Rams on Monday Night Football. And the Saints showed some cracks. The Bears were able to tie it up, after being down late, but in overtime, they were able to come through. And so that's going to lead to a very interesting Sunday Night Football match this coming week with the Saints versus the Bucs. Who knows? The Saints did play them very well at the Superdome, and I do think that New Orleans is a much better team in New Orleans. I think that's been proven out. So I give Tampa the edge, but again, like what I saw tonight has me questioning, and maybe Tampa was just looking ahead. It's possible that, they took the Giants lightly, and maybe they were just looking into a really big divisional clash against New Orleans. So I give Tampa the edge, but that should be an entertaining game. We haven't seen enough of Breeze versus Brady with, both being in opposite conferences for most of their careers. I know obviously Breeze was in San Diego for a short time there early on, but that should be a fun game, and especially since it's the last time that they'll be playing in the regular season. So I'm definitely looking forward to that one. In the NFC North, the Packers-Vikings, that's some of these rivalry games, you just never really know where it'll go. Even though on paper you might say, Packers versus the Vikings, they'll win that. But Minnesota, it's a team, they're better than their 2-5 record would indicate. It's not a very good defense like it has, but I think that's the biggest thing with them. I know they traded Stephon Diggs, but that defense is a lot worse than it's been in recent years. But hey, when you can get Dalvin Cook going and he's healthy and you can kind of establish that run that Mike Zimmer loves to do, they're a tough team to beat. And it looked like they were maybe going to blow it against Green Bay. It seemed like Rodgers was going to pull off kind of another miracle, but it just didn't happen. So, that's a division that it's average, but I don't think it's, anything great. I think Green Bay, when it's all said and done, they are the best team in that division for sure. Detroit did not look very good against Indy. It would seem like maybe Detroit was gonna, factor into this, but I think that game kind of showed me nah. And Kenny Galladay got hurt as well, so I think Detroit will definitely be towards the bottom of that division. An exciting game in the AFC West. So the Broncos and the Chargers. This was a fun game, and the Chargers, it's unfucking believable where they have these like 3 touchdown leads, or just multiple score leads, and they blow it every time. And this one had to sting. And it's a division rival. Every reason to think that with Justin Herbert and the guys they have on that offense, and some players coming back on defense, I know they're pretty banged up there. Every reason to think that they could have gone on a run. Their tough schedule is kind of behind them. They had lost to the Bucs, they had lost to the Saints, games that they could have easily won, and they got to be kicking themselves. So now they're 2-5, and give Drew Lock credit. He definitely engineered a very good comeback, and I think going into this game, I think people were starting to question, what's his viability as being the Bucs, future starting quarterback. But certainly. He looked good, making this comeback. KJ Hamler with a big touchdown on the last play of the game. So just kind of a wild finish there in Denver. Definitely one of the best games of the weekend. Not one that you necessarily expected it to, Chargers, Broncos, from a Giants fan perspective, kind of in that Northeast mindset. You're not really looking at that, unless there's like fantasy implications, but that definitely was a game I was keeping an eye on in that 4:00 window, just as the Saints Bears, was going down the wire as well. So now you look at, the playoff picture and kind of the draft scenarios. You have the Jets at the bottom. The Jaguars, they're making a QB change. Minshew's out. They're going with the rookie QB out of Oregon State. So I think the Jags, I've said this before, but I think if the Jets were to somehow win a game, and that's a big if they were to win again, I think the Jaguars, that's kind of their main competition. I do think the Giants, though, as we've seen, they've been competitive in so many games that they'll find their way to get a few more wins. So, and then at the top, the Steelers are really looking like the best team. And it'd be fun. Steelers-Chiefs is an AFC Championship game. I think that'd be a lot of fun just because the Steelers have had the Chiefs number for years. I mean, this, like, at least from what I can remember, in the playoffs or just in the regular season. I mean, obviously, things have changed a bit, but I think that would be a fun one. Whereas, like, Ravens-Chiefs, I really just think that the Chiefs would win. We saw that on Monday night, and they've had their Lamar versus Mahomes. There's been some good games there, for sure. It's not like it's been easy. This year it was, but I think Steelers-Chiefs, that would be, kind of the older, grizzled veteran in Roethlisberger, and now, the younger upstart Mahomes. Looking way ahead here, but I think that'd be a fun AFC Championship. And then in the NFC, if the Bucs, Seahawks, and Packers, and to me, the Saints to a degree, right? I think like the Bucs and Saints battle in the NFC South. That's why I'm so looking forward to this Sunday night game. I think that's going to be interesting. But like any of those combos, Brady, Breeze, Rodgers, Wilson, those are just bound to be interesting. Those are, I mean, NFC Divisional Round or NFC Championship, like, you're going to see some form of those teams being in there. And it just goes to show you, quarterback play is everything. Those are the best teams. The one that have the best quarterbacks, for the most part, are the teams that are on the top of the standings. That's just the key to everything. So, yeah, definitely an eventful week. Obviously, a lot going on in that Giant Buck game, and where will that lead them moving forward? With a couple of big divisional games on tap, I definitely. It's funny, whenever I root for Washington to beat the Giants, where it'd be more advantageous for the Giants to lose, the Giants always win those games. We saw it a few weeks ago. I saw, years and years. So I'm expecting a Giant win this week. I really am. But we'll see. Big night tomorrow night with the election. Everyone should go and vote if they haven't already. And I'll talk to you guys next week.